Today is the fifth session of 6 in this workshop series, and today we're going to talk about food philosophies.
All right, so I'm so excited to be here, everybody, talking about one of my all-time favorite subjects. It's food philosophies. I think that, some of the questions I get asked most often are, what is the diet that's best for me? Which is the diet that's going to guarantee weight loss? Which is the diet that's going to be the easiest for me to stick with and then make sure I don't gain any of the weight back? And of course, as we have learned over these weeks together, we've talked about the obesogenic environment, the notion that lifestyle has become more sedentary, the notion that appetite and metabolism are complex and they're regulated by many, many different factors. We've had the opportunity to learn about food labels. We've learned about nutrition claims. We've learned about portions, meal planning. And so the hope is that today we can bring all of those things together and address some of these questions. And I am thrilled to have Kristen with us. The combination of her experience, her intuitive nature, really put together the knowledge and the skills to put these philosophies into practice.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to be here. So let's jump right in because we have so much that we want to go over today and share with you, as well as hear your thoughts as well. So as Florencia mentioned, we're looking at exploring dietary philosophies, and some of the things that is important for you as you're considering which dietary philosophy you might want to try on, kind of like a coat. The first one would be to find your why. So this is about identifying what is your unique reason for making a change. What about this feels really important to you? What's at the heart of this for you? And really connecting in with that, understanding your why, so that part is really considered as you're exploring these different philosophies.
So diving right into our first philosophy, we're going to talk about the low carbohydrate philosophy. Very, very popular. Probably, I'm going to say, the top on the list when we were asking for feedback in terms of what to cover. So as you know, by definition, low carbohydrate diet means that you're restricting the macronutrient called carbohydrates. And why do we do this? So carbohydrates are not an essential macronutrient. They're not essential like proteins, and they're not essential like fat. And that's because the liver and the kidney can produce them. So the notion of the low carbohydrate philosophy means that you're restricting their intake, meaning less than 45% of your intake in a day comes from carbohydrates. When we talk about ketogenic, keto diet, who hasn't heard of keto? It's probably on the cover of every single magazine. It's typically not the medical keto, but ketogenic diet refers to a type of low carbohydrate diet. And what we do is we restrict the carbohydrate intake further. In order to do that, you consume about less than 50 grams per day. You don't have to worry about all these numbers, but it's just to help you understand that it's a more restrictive program. And the benefits that we have seen from the medical aspect is that there are metabolic improvements. I won't get through these, but it improves things like glucose, your triglycerides, and can even decrease hunger and cravings. Importantly, it raises that that HDL, right? Remember, we learned about the fats, the protectives, the good one, the HDL.
You bet. So as part of approaching this lower carbohydrate philosophy, there's a knowledge piece here to be gained, which is what foods contribute to carbohydrate intake. It's not just breads and pastas. So there's all kinds of foods within our diet that contribute to carbohydrate. And there is a small learning curve of what are those foods, taking a look at what foods do you routinely consume that contain carbohydrate. And it's helpful to also learn what is the quality of those carbohydrates.
We're going to dive into meal replacements, meal replacement philosophy. And so what is by definition a meal replacement when we speak in terms of medical nutrition therapy? Meal replacements are formulated products that replace or designed to replace an entire meal. They contain all of the micro and macronutrients. This is very important. It is regulated and it has to meet certain criteria in order to fit the definition of medical meal replacement. Now, meal replacements go back to the 1950s. I always like adding in a little bit of history because I find that the history adds to the philosophy. And in the 1950s, meal replacements were very different. We had very low quality protein. There weren't any micronutrients available. And there was a lot of disease risk and safety issues. Now, medical nutrition therapy meal replacements nowadays are very different. Again, they include the micro plus the macronutrient component. They replace a full meal. And study over study, landmark studies in the field of obesity medicine have demonstrated that when meal replacements are used within a structured multidisciplinary program, again, go back to that first session where I showed you the slide of the staircase, the multidisciplinary program, meal replacements sustained over time lead to significant weight loss, or at least percentage of participants achieving that 5%. Remember, a little goes a long way. But again, you need to add these components all together. It's not just a meal replacement on its own. It's within the context of a medical nutrition program. Last but not least, one of my favorites, the Mediterranean philosophy. And not to bore everybody with my history, but I think, again, the history is very important. The Mediterranean concept dates back to at least where we know the 1940s, where we began to become interested in this notion of what people surrounding the Mediterranean were eating. And Greece at the time was one of the poorest countries in Europe. Everybody at the time of a group of research to try to build on that was expecting to find malnutrition, but guess what? They actually found that the population of the island of Crete had 1/3 of the rates of heart disease compared to the US, and then they barely had any cancers. And ever since, we have been captivated by this notion of the Mediterranean diet. It is the one that continues time over time to demonstrate the most robust scientific evidence for reduction of heart disease. This is very important. Most robust scientific evidence for reduction of heart disease. It also has demonstrated a decrease in the risk of diabetes, depression, dementia, certain cancers. And importantly, it's the one that has demonstrated decreased overall mortality. Now, this is a very different type of philosophy because it's not about the calories, but rather the lifestyle. And olive oil, of course, as you can see in every single picture referring to the Mediterranean diet, is one of their biggest staples. So Kristen, right over to you.
Right on. So in this particular approach, when we look at the Mediterranean dietary approach or lifestyle, we have daily intake of whole grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds. We do have, and of course, olive oil. We also have protein-rich foods. And of course, those are part of the nutrition, but they're not sort of center stage. They're almost more like a condiment or almost like a side dish. So the proportion of the protein is less. And so when we look at the Mediterranean dietary philosophy, I think it's important that, like, how do you put these foods together and in what combination? So we need to have a willingness to cook or prepare food. And so, of course, I think this requires some meal planning skills. There's ways of maybe making some minor tweaks to what you're already doing. Maybe we just do a couple of additions or maybe some substitutions. So maybe we add in a baked oatmeal in the morning to get that whole grain, and we top it with some fruit, some nuts or seeds, and we dollop a little bit of yogurt on there. And there you've got your Mediterranean breakfast.
There were so many wonderful things shared today, but I really do believe in what Kristen talked about in the beginning. Go back, find your why, because that's really going to help you when you come up with this approach that you think is the most healthy way for you to eat. Knowing that that's because of your why is really going to help you stick with that and keep you motivated and keep you interested. So that, I think, is the most important thing here. As Florenzia just said, no one approach is correct. And also, that approach might change as your life progresses and life circumstances change for you. Really important to factor in, affordability of the type of foods that you want to eat. What is your location? Are you rural and remote and it's harder to find, a whole plethora of ingredients? And then also, what are the needs of your family? How can you do something like Kristen just shared with us, which is creating that one meal that then actually you can kind of manipulate and change it to make sure that you appease everyone that's in your family. So there are so many food philosophies. So many. We actually only touched on three main ones today, and I feel like we could have gone on forever. But with that being said, what are you interested in? Take away what you feel is most meaningful for you, and where you want, also explore what else could exist.